42 million.
The art world, where paintings change hands for fortunes.
Sold. Thank you very much.
But for every known masterpiece, there may be another still waiting to be discovered.
This is it.
International art dealer Philip Mould and I have teamed up to hunt for lost works by great artists. We use old-fashioned detective work and state-of-the-art science to get to the truth.
Science can enable us to see beyond the human eye.
Oh, my goodness.
Every case is packed with surprise and intrigue.
Is it? Or isn't it a Freud, then?
But not every painting is quite what it seems.
Gosh, why didn't I notice that before?
It's a journey that can end in joy
There is enough to support the conclusion that it is by Tom Roberts.
or bitter disappointment.
I don't think it's a work by Gauguin. I'm very sorry.
In this episode, a Welsh farmer turned art hunter
Is this how you pass the sort of long nights of lambing when you're waiting for the next one to arrive?
discovers that not all that glitters is gold.
So has it been made to deceive?
Can our investigation prove that a painting found on eBay is really a lost work for King George III?
I'm going to be looking at this painting probably for more hours than anyone since the artist painted it.
We draw together the worlds of art and forensic science.
It would be the first time in Fatal Fortune that human remains helped us with an attribution.
To try and help this amateur art sleuth prove he's found a lost treasure.
Just remind us, what did you buy it for on eBay?
Oh, here.
Our Fatal Fortune investigations have taken us to some beautiful locations across the world. This time, we've been called to Anglesey, at the northern tip of Wales, somewhere both I and Philip know well.
Well, it's great to be back in North Wales. I used to come here as a child on holiday.
Gosh, I spent ages down here as a kid. In fact, the high point was when I entered the Clanfestiniog fancy dress competition as John Lennon.
And did you win?
Unfortunately, runner-up only. I broke my circular glasses.
We're here at the request of farmer Hugh Lewis. Far from the high-end galleries and auction houses Philip's more familiar with, Hugh hunts for art treasures online.
We're here to talk about Hugh's paintings, which he bought on eBay.
Which is a pretty bold move, given how many fakes we've discovered out there.
Well, that's a pastime riven with risk, but I'm intrigued to know what he's turned up.
As COVID restrictions stop us meeting in the farmhouse, we've been offered sanctuary in the local church.
Hello, Hugh.
Hello, hi.
Very nice to meet you.
And very nice to meet you as well.
We've arranged to look at some of Hugh's paintings.
I've never dared buy paintings on eBay. Furniture, yes, but paintings, no.
And I'm immediately reminded of how shark-infested these waters can be.
This is classic buying online territory. You've been taken in by a painting that was designed to look like an oil painting, but isn't.
OK, so that's one dream crushed. Well done, Philip.
The date of the painting, I'm afraid it's not as it should be.
Yeah, that's really disappointing.
This is a classic trapper in that way. We call them trappers,
Yeah.
you know, and they take your eye, you get excited, deal done, you bring it home, and Bob's not your uncle.
Little knowledge is a dangerous thing, perhaps.
Despite the setbacks, Hugh has another picture he's particularly excited about.
This is a painting of the Last Supper.
Ah.
I saw it online, and you can see the oil sketch underneath, which is really quite well done.
The Last Supper, big subject.
This is one of the most recognizable scenes in Western art. Christ at the center, his apostles reacting to the shocking news that he will soon die. The bread and the wine, familiar symbols of his sacrifice. And Judas shown wrestling with the decision to betray his master. And Hugh's research extends to a possible artist.
I believe it's Benjamin West. He started painting in America, then he came to this country.
Benjamin West claimed he first learned to paint when Native Americans showed him how to mix pigments from mud. After leaving America and settling in Britain, success followed quickly, and he became one of the most famous artists of the 18th century. The bold storytelling of his paintings captivated London. Crowds queued to see his canvases filled with moments of drama and high emotion. And his biggest fan was King George III, painted here by West. He made West his official history painter, and together they aimed to bring about a magnificent new era in British art. During the 20th century, many of West's works left Britain and are now in the museums and galleries of America. I wonder what makes Hugh think that this rather dark and damaged-looking painting could be an overlooked West.
Someone's had a bit of a go at it with what looks like a Brillo pad down the bottom.
So there's real quality there. The condition, you're right, a bit problematic. But if we could attach the name Benjamin West to it,
Yeah.
I mean, that, from an art historical point of view, from a commercial point of view, is worth having.
So how much did you pay for it, Hugh?
Well, it was advertised online for £50 as a starting bid, and nobody bid, so I got it for the original price of £50, which is amazing, really.
Well, 50 quid is a heartening starting point for you. If this is right, I suspect, to someone who feels attached to this type of artist subject matter, £30,000, possibly more.
Sounds interesting. It's good.
Buy a lot of sheep with that, Hugh.
Yes, yes, yes.
I want to take a moment to get to know this painting.
There's a lot that really intrigues me about Hugh's picture. I was brought up a Catholic. I was an altar boy across the border in Liverpool, and I'm used to this image, this story narrated in the New Testament pictorially, but not quite like this. There's a sort of journalistic energy to this composition. Christ is in the middle, but then the disciples are grouped on the left and the right. They're huddled, they're discussing, they're talking. And then there's the technique itself. There's a sort of softness, a sort of rather burnished quality. Look how the painter has modulated the composition. So your eye goes from light to dark. The Italians have a word for it, chiaroscuro. But the other point is, though, this is not a fully resolved painting. It's work in progress, work that is, I think, unquestionably a sketch. But despite the fact that there's so much going for it, there are aspects of this painting that worry me. There are areas. They've been scrubbed, got at by some failed restoration process. I find that a bit disturbing. One thing that's also slightly worrying is I cannot see a signature. Now, West was one of those artists who he was a self-promoter, he just loved leaving his signature on things. I would like to have found that. That would have been quite reassuring, like a sort of hallmark on a piece of silver. That would have been rather useful. And perhaps I shouldn't be motivated in so simplistic a way, but wouldn't it be wonderful to turn a £50 eBay purchase into a genuine work by Benjamin West?
I want to know if Hugh can throw any light on who owned his painting before.
What did you manage to find out about the provenance of the painting?
Well, the seller did say that the painting had been in storage for 60 years and it belonged to his wife's father. Previously, it belonged to an old woman in a big house who paid it in lieu of a debt for some building work the family had done for them.
And whereabouts in the country was all this going on?
Surrey.
In Surrey?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's as far back as the seller was able to take it for you?
Yes.
So what we've got with the provenance then is you've got the seller who lived in Surrey.
Yep.
It had been in storage for 60 years.
Yes.
He and his wife had inherited it from his wife's father.
Yep.
And the father got it.
For payment for a building job.
Right, and instead of getting money, got this painting.
Yes, the family thought it was worthless.
So it might turn out that the painting that they thought was worthless, actually, you with your eye,
Yeah.
have found something that could be very valuable. We don't know, but it could be.
Yeah, hopefully. I did message him after buying the painting, and he said, well, if it's worth $1 million, please don't tell me, is all he said. But he was quite good-humoured about it, so it was nice of him.
Philosophical, perhaps.
Oh, yeah. There's some work to be done, I think.
Well, that's what we're here for,
Yes.
to do that work.
Yeah.
And if we do manage to transform your eBay bargain buy
Yeah.
into a Benjamin West, do you think you'll sell it? Do you think you'll hang on to it?
Well, things like this can be life-changing, or at least help. Farming is a very precarious industry at the moment.
So it'd be
Simple
pretty
as that.
handy.
Oh, yes. Will probably be sold if it's genuine.
Well, fingers crossed then.
Yes, fingers crossed.
To begin my investigation into Hughes' painting, I'm heading to another church, slightly larger this time, the Chapel of St. Peter and Paul in Greenwich. I need to find out more about West and whether the Last Supper was a subject he ever painted. To help with my research, I've arranged to meet Desmond Shaw Taylor. Desmond, hello.
Good to see you.
He's the most recent surveyor of the Queen's pictures, a position West once held in the court of George III. We're meeting in front of the only West work still hanging in the space it was made for, a painting of St. Paul shipwrecked. This is an epic work, isn't it, Desmond?
Benjamin West specialized in full-scale figure paintings in the great tradition of Raphael and Michelangelo. I think what he sort of adds, not perhaps you can't add much to Raphael and Michelangelo, but his particular take on it, I think, are these very abrupt transitions from light to dark. You can see particularly that area of light in the center of the composition, which you can't actually see the fire, but you can see the light of the fire. So you see these shapes in dramatic silhouette.
It's certainly stunning to see that. I mean, and trying to relate it to the little sketch that we've got. I just want to ask you some questions about that. So, Desmond, what we're looking at is a possible Benjamin West sketch for a Last Supper.
Last Supper, good. There are actually two paintings of the Last Supper by Benjamin West for George III. Two really important commissions at Windsor. And the first is a new-built chapel, the Chapel of Revealed Religion. And basically it was going to tell the entire story of the Christian religion from beginning to end.
Very grand.
Very grand. And its high altar was going to look like that. The Last Supper, sitting on the altar table as Last Suppers should, because it is about the communion wafer and the wine.
And what happened to that?
Never built. Project entirely abandoned.
So George III commissioned Benjamin West to paint a Last Supper for this new chapel at Windsor, which then never got built. The painting was painted,
Yes.
but clearly was never hung there.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned two Last Suppers. What about the other one?
Other one, it was created for St. George's Chapel at Windsor.
And that definitely does exist. I mean, that's
Absolutely,
where Harry and
no
Meghan got
question.
married, and we all know it very well.
Absolutely. And I'm showing you here a watercolour of it, exactly the same position, immediately over the altar table. And it was set off by huge stained glass above, also designed by Benjamin West, showing the resurrection of Christ.
So that's an intriguing start. There's not one, but two large-scale Benjamin West Last Suppers, both altarpiece paintings for King George III. So if Hughes' painting is genuine, it has to be a preparatory work for one of those. Our next job has to be to find those two large, finished works.
The first one, made for the never-built Chapel Royal, is now in the stores of the Tate. Usually I'd be rushing to see it in the flesh, but COVID shutting down museums all over the world has meant that we have to rely on digital technology to make a comparison.
So what we now need to do is work out whether Hughes' little eBay sketch could in any way be preparatory for the Tate picture, this monumental 2 metres by 3 metres composition, and at first glance, a very, very similar concept, painting. It's the Last Supper. It's Christ at the centre, a very sacred, significant, and much portrayed scene. And the light is rather similar, the sense of the tent and the moon, that strong drapery. So the question is, how does that compare to Hugh's sketch?
Well, I can see some similarities, but there are so many things that are different, Philip, that I just can't quite get past. So the figure of Judas is the really obvious one, because it's so dominant, isn't it, in Hugh's painting? He's there, big and brooding and tortured, right in the foreground, about to exit right. And I presume that's Judas sitting there on the right, is it, in that painting?
Mm. And I have to say, dare I say it, I prefer it in Hugh's sketch. Mm.
And then when I look at that Christ in Benjamin West's painting, he slightly looks like those kind of romantic princes in the Ladybird books I used to read as a child. You know, when you look at his face. And then you look at the one in Hugh's picture, and there is a very different face, isn't it? Older, with the weight of the world on his shoulders.
And I think you put your finger on it. There are some fundamental differences here. Your eye goes from the divine image of Christ through to the huddled, troubled one of Judas. Not necessarily with this one in the Tate. There are definitely similarities. There's the same sort of, the gene pool of thinking is the same, but no, it doesn't feel like one is the sketch for the other.
So we're decided. Hugh's painting can't be a sketch for the 1784 Royal Chapel altarpiece painting. We have to hope that the second one is a better match.
West may have been American, but he was at the heart of the British art establishment in the 18th century, and one of the founders of the Royal Academy. Although it, like the Tate, is closed to visitors, I'm being allowed access to their archives by curator Annette Wickham.
Hello, Fiona.
Hi, Annette, nice to see you.
June.
Wow, that is a very striking picture, isn't it?
West was one of the artists who successfully petitioned George III to establish the Royal Academy to promote the visual arts. Portrayed here in his president's hat, on his president's throne, West remains its longest-serving president, a position he held for 27 years. His name appears in decades' worth of exhibition records. I'm on the hunt for any entry that might refer to Hugh's painting. The first reference I can find to a Last Supper by Benjamin West is in 1784, and this is a list of paintings exhibited at the Royal Academy in that year. And we've got here, number 437, The Last Supper, a design for a picture for His Majesty's Chapel in Windsor Castle. That's the picture I looked at with Philip that's now in the Tate. And we don't think that Hugh's picture is a preparatory sketch for that Last Supper. But what is good to know is that Benjamin West was exhibiting his sketches. The next reference I can find is a bit of a jump ahead, all the way to 1804. Now here we've got The Last Supper, the original sketch for the great picture over the communion table in the Collegiate Church at Windsor. Now, I've done enough royal weddings in my time for the BBC to know that the Collegiate Church is the same as St. George's Chapel. So this, I think, is the sketch that we're interested in when it comes to Hugh's particular picture. And what's very frustrating is, although it shows it was exhibited, it has no information about its size, any dimensions at all, or any description of it. So that's encouraging and sort of frustrating in equal measure. And then finally, 1806, so another year on, again, sketch for the picture of the Last Supper, the altarpiece of St. George's Chapel, Windsor, Benjamin West. But no details, no dimensions. And is this the same sketch that was shown in a previous year? So that's at least one sketch for the Royal Chapel, and more promisingly, one, possibly two, for St. George's Chapel. The lack of description makes them too vague to identify as Hugh's. I wonder whether we know where those sketches are today, and if one of them could be Hugh's picture.
What we do know is that there are 2 sketches by West for his Last Supper, which have been identified and their whereabouts are known. One for St George's Chapel, one for the chapel that was never built. But there is possibly a 3rd sketch and hasn't been seen or recorded for over 100 years.
A missing Last Supper sketch?
That's right.
I like the sound of that.
Well, there are references to it from the works that West's sons inherited from him. Eventually, they started selling off the work.
Well, this is exciting. So it's possible, if it exists, it could be Hugh's picture.
It's possible.
So I need to find a record of that sale and see what I can dig out.
That's right.
Thanks, Annette.
You're welcome.
So now we know West produced sketches for his 2 Windsor altarpiece paintings. After a bit more digging, I found out that one for the Royal Chapel and one for St George's Chapel both went to buyers in the United States in the 20th century. But what of the 3rd possible sketch not seen for over 100 years? Could Hugh have found that sketch?
A missing sketch is certainly intriguing. But I still need to be sure Hugh's picture is a preparatory work for a finished painting. I've located West's 2nd altarpiece painting, the St George's Chapel Last Supper. Since 1980, it's been in America at the Detroit Institute of Arts, one of the world's great art collections, and a museum I'm familiar with. But with international travel prohibited, I've arranged to see it through curator Benjamin Coleman.
Ben, hi there. Well, thank you for joining us in this funny way across the Atlantic.
It's always a pleasure to talk about Benjamin West, even if we need the magic of technology to make it possible right now.
I can see it behind you now. It is quite extraordinary. What a magnificent painting. What is also remarkable, and to me very satisfying, is I'm looking at the 2, and those similarities are so resounding, really familiar signs that our sketch is so close to your epic work.
The moon through the left-hand arch is a match. The disciples' groupings are the same. So too the cup and the bread. And most identifiably, Judas is glowering at us from the front of the painting in the same way.
But, you know, I mean, we are dwarfed by yours. What a magnificent painting.
This painting has such a magnetic pull from across the room. It's the first painting that you see when you round the corner into this tremendous gallery of American art history paintings. The painting pulls you in from across the room. There's lots of contrast, lots of shadow. You know in half an instant who is bathed in a kind of virtuous golden light, who's cast in a sickly green shadow. You know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is.
So something I'm trying to get my head around, Ben, is how come ours is, although the same basic colours, so much softer? The light is so much gentler than in yours.
Thinking about Benjamin West as an artist who sometimes made different versions of a composition, he was very eclectic as a painter who experimented with different styles before he settled on finished work.
It could just be that Benjamin West is experimenting, is thinking of an alternative idea, a different mood for the Last Supper.
There is, though, a less reassuring possibility.
And what are the challenges in trying to prove a Benjamin West as authentic in your experience?
It's a big question. Certainly, we know that West had many students and many imitators. So it certainly doesn't seem unlikely that some of West's students or some of his admirers would have made copies after such a major commission as this Last Supper for the chapel at Windsor.
So Hugh's sketch is definitely related to the St George's Chapel Last Supper. What we must now do is prove it's a genuine preparatory work by West himself.
I'm on the hunt for more information about this missing sketch, listed in the sale that West's sons held after their father's death. West was the highest paid painter of his time, and on his death in 1821, his two sons struggled to maintain the lifestyle they'd grown accustomed to. At the Paul Mellon Centre for Studies in British Art, I've got a copy of that 3-day sale. So in 1829, Benjamin West's sons had effectively a fire sale of all their dad's works. It was 180 pictures, and when you get to lot 21, what do we have? The study for the admired picture placed over the table of the altar of the choir of St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Now that is exciting, because if Hughes' picture is a study by Benjamin West, it's a study for St. George's Chapel. It describes it. This altarpiece was, and this is in italics because it's clearly particularly important, painted by command of His late Majesty, George III, of course. So they're throwing everything at selling this picture and making a big thing of that royal connection. Now, so far, I've managed to find out that Benjamin West did a number of Last Suppers, but I haven't had any dimensions. Here are some dimensions. So the Last Supper is 1 foot 2 inches wide, so that's 14 inches wide, and 10.5 inches high. So when you compare that to Hughes' picture is 15.5 inches wide and 11 inches high. So it's not exactly the same. There's about, what, an inch, half an inch in it. And if you think Hughes' picture is quite likely to have been relined a number of times, and that can change the shape of a picture. 230 years ago, it wasn't considered as critical to be that precise about measurements as it is now. So I know it's not exactly the same, but it's so close. So that's massively encouraging. The question is, did it sell? And if it sold, who bought it? This is an annotated version of the catalogue, and it has a list of the people who bought it. Nash. Now, when I think of Nash in the 1800s, the first name that comes to mind is John Nash, the celebrated architect who built much of Buckingham Palace, the finest buildings in Regency London. Is it John Nash who bought this picture? So what have we got? We've got a painting here that isn't exactly the same dimensions as Hughes, but it certainly describes Hughes, and the dimensions are as near as damn it. So there's a very strong possibility this is Hughes' picture we're seeing in this sale. And then a buyer, Nash. Could it be John Nash? That's what I need to look into next.
I'm keen to see what science can tell us about Hughes' picture. The surface of the painting is so dark and muddied, I can't help thinking that there's more to be revealed underneath. I've asked Professor Aviva Bernstock at the Courtauld Institute in London to take a look at it, and she's already intrigued.
Hi, Aviva. How are you getting on?
Hello. Hello. I haven't seen anything like this before. It's the first time that I've seen a sketch or a grisaille, a black and white picture that's partly painted.
Aviva's infrared imaging is able to penetrate the layers of varnish and paint to reveal the drawing lines below.
So you can see beneath that brownish coating, or the brownish coatings, to this sketch that's underneath, which looks like it's actually in 2 different sorts of black. This sort of fluid black, and also these hatchings, which are very detailed, which are done probably in a different sort of dry medium.
Do you know, that's really thrilling, because you can see now there's this cross-hatching, this energy, this activity.
Well, there are quite a few workings out in the drawing stage. For example, you can see that Christ is now holding the bread, whereas he had it on the table beforehand in the sketch phase.
Oh, yes. So it's a sort of rolling, developing project, this.
Yeah. Hey, look, there's a hand. I didn't notice that before. Do you see that? Look, there's a hand and there's a knee.
Oh, my God, that's
look,
great.
So there's a lot of working out here.
Yes,
there's a lot more. There's a hand that goes down under the drapery, which isn't there because he's now holding his hands up.
Yeah, fascinating.
And then there's the knee. So he's drawn naked underneath this robe.
Yeah. But what does look and feel really distinctive are those sort of impassioned lines. And the way that the forms are coming out of this sort of thicket of pencil strokes.
I think it'd be very hard to imitate that. So if we saw it in another picture, firmly attributed to West, that would be quite good evidence of the similar hand.
So a characteristic of the artist, whoever that person may be.
To me, this looks like the free-flowing work of a truly accomplished artist, not a student or faker. But Aviva's right. We'll have to find another example by him in order to prove that this is Benjamin West.
I want to check back in with Philip and tell him where I've got to with the provenance.
Well, let me show you what I found. I found records of the original sketch for St. George's Chapel. Have a look at this. Lot 21, The Last Supper. This is from a sale in 1829. The dimensions are almost identical to Hugh's picture. And look at the description. The study for the admired picture placed over the table of the altar of the choir of St. George's Chapel, Windsor. So I think there's a very good chance that is Hugh's picture.
Sure. And does it say who bought it?
Well, there's this name here, Nash.
I wonder if that could be John Nash, the great architect.
Well, I wondered the same. And in the same sale, the same Nash bought 3 Benjamin West sketches. Jacob and Laban, Resurrection of Our Saviour, and then Cupid complaining to Venus of being stung by a bee.
Huh. And what happens to them after that?
Well, on the death of John Nash in 1835, there was a sale. And these Benjamin West sketches, the ones I showed you just now, are in that sale. So I think we can say that the Nash of 1829 is John Nash, the architect.
Sure.
Frustratingly, there is no mention anywhere of the Last Supper. There's no record of it in this sale in 1835, and Nash's family destroyed all his personal records after his death. Bit of a family scandal, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've hit a dead end there.
With the paper trail seemingly going cold, I need a new strategy. Could the back of the painting hold any leads?
There's a sticker here, which I like to see. Expert in ancient and modern pictures. Haymarket, which is 2 or 3 minutes from here, in central London. And then I'm trying to look at the gallery name, and there's a letter, G maybe? The sticker's been ripped, I just can't quite see what that is. And what else have we got? Numbers, 3722 on the canvas, possibly from an auction house. And then above it, 405, what looks like W, perhaps?
This one in particular looks familiar.
I think this could be a Christie stencil. We've got a sticker and we've got numbers, and those are clues, and those are something that we can definitely investigate.
As forensic analysis continues, Aviva has made an exciting discovery about the pigments in Hugh's painting, and she's keen to share it.
These are the very, very top layers of the picture now we're looking at.
Yes, the very top layers. And what's really interesting is that you can see that there's a top layer of varnish which contains something, and I don't know how to identify it. It's this very strongly yellow fluorescing particle here. It's just one particle, and I don't know what it is. I couldn't identify it.
OK, try this thought. We know, but there's some fantastically lurid accounts for the materials he used in the 18th century, such as Indian yellow from the urine of cows only fed on mango leaves, and mummy brown, made from real mummies excavated from the ground, you know, in Egypt and places.
I am sceptical about the materials that people say they used. But I have found in this cross-section a few characteristic particles, which could be mummy, I suppose. But this fluorescing yellow area could potentially be genuine Indian yellow. Unfortunately, I can't do it because I can't identify the materials because they're organic materials. But I have a colleague who can do it.
Well, please try it, because it would be the first time in Fake or Fortune that human remains helped us with an attribution.
That dirt and damage seen under Aviva's microscope still troubles me. And I'm really concerned the painting's condition is now holding us back. So we've asked Hugh to join us in the gallery.
Hello.
Hi, Hugh. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
So, Hugh, we've got a decision to make, and the question is to restore it or not. Now, Philip, what are the arguments for it?
If we're going to give this picture every opportunity, it's got to look the part. And I think there are losses here which are still problematic.
I mean, it's particularly that section at the bottom, isn't it? You're thinking, Philip, where either the colour never was there, or it's been abraded off in some way.
And one of the things I think we've got to really get to terms with is what varnish is meant to be there and how much of it is dirt. And that is one of those things that, with a restorer, we can really understand. And I'd love to find a signature, but there's still quite a lot, I think, that needs to come out. And restorers are used to doing this. It's first aid. It's not open heart surgery, this, but it's first aid.
I just want to sound a note of caution because, I mean, brutally, Hugh, you are taking a gamble. You spent 50 quid on this picture. More money will now be spent on having it restored, and there's no guarantee at the end of the day that the authenticating panel will come out and say it's a Benjamin West, and you might have spent the money for nothing. So given that, are you prepared to put it forward to the restorer?
Yes, I am. I'm sure it would shine once it's cleaned, and I will be guided by your judgment.
I like your style. OK. To the restorers.
I've sent Hugh's painting to Rupert Featherstone at the Hamilton Carr Institute at Cambridge University. Not only is Rupert a hugely experienced restorer, he also spent many years at the Royal Collection, where they have numerous examples of West's paintings. So I'm really keen to hear how the painting stands up to his experienced eye.
Hello, Rupert.
Hello, how are you?
So what are your first thoughts about this picture?
Well, it's a mixed bag. It's very interesting. There are features that remind me of Wests I've seen, but I'm not so sure about all this sort of outlining. It's slightly unusual, the sort of going almost like a comic book style, isn't there, in parts?
It strikes me as having great potential, but it's just being held back somehow. Do you think you're going to be able to resurrect this picture?
I'm pretty confident we can. And you can already see the difference in colour, so that the deep turquoisey colour of the sky is coming out. It was such a sickly green before.
So how are you going to make sure that you only take off the dirt and not what the artist intended?
What I'm doing at the moment is just removing the natural resin, and you can tell that on the swab and using ultraviolet. So I'm not going through all the layers. I certainly won't want to rush into it and clean all the way through, which is what happened before. And that's why we've ended up with this sort of abrasion and damage at the bottom.
What do you take varnish off? You've got to put paint on?
For example, Judas's face just reads as a sort of fuzzy blob at the moment, but just a couple of little bits of retouching, little dots to cover up those areas of ground, and you'll be able to see his face again, and that sort of scowl and angst or whatever.
The process of conservation takes us back to what the artist intended and might also bring about revelations.
I would just be so thrilled if you could find a signature.
I mean, where would it be? I suppose normally you'd expect a signature along the bottom edge, so one might worry that if a signature had been there, it may no longer be there. I'm going to be looking at this painting probably for more hours than anyone since the artist painted it, I suspect. So if there is a signature somewhere, I really hope I'll be able to spot it.
I've been looking into the stencils on the back of Hugh's painting, and I thought that one of them might be from a Christie's auction. We've had some exciting news from Christie's, so I've asked Hugh to come back down to London so I can share it with him.
So, Hugh, do you remember the numbers on the back of your painting?
Yes.
So there was 3722 and 405, what looked possibly like a W.
Yes.
So we went to Christie's.
All right, yeah.
And they said, that's not 405W, that's 405V.
All right.
So that means it was sold through Christie's.
So it's record.
So it's recorded. So what we found out is the date of the sale that 405V refers to.
All right, yeah.
I've got the details here. Ancient and Modern Pictures, the property of Sir William W. Knighton, deceased. So on the third day of the sale, May the 23rd, 1885, it refers to your picture, lot 451. This is definitely your picture with 405V on the back, and it says, The Last Supper, B. West.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, that is a massive breakthrough. We've been talking about various sketches by Benjamin West. We now have information about your sketch. This is your sketch being sold by Christie's and being attributed to Benjamin West.
That's good.
Your stamp is on the back, 405V. Oh, and interestingly here, it says signed and dated. What this tells us is there is a signature on your painting.
That's good.
On your sketch, so we need to find it. I mean, obviously it could be someone pretending to be Benjamin West, but nonetheless, at this sale, it is attributed to Benjamin West.
That's good.
So we know that William Knighton sold it. Now, who bought it?
And who did buy it?
M. Cole, it says. Christie's think M. Cole is probably Martin Colnaghi.
Who is Martin Colnaghi?
Martin Colnaghi was a very, very well-known art dealer of his time. You know, a very well-known name. It's a name we come across quite often on Fake or Fortune.
We're bound to find some lead, aren't we? There'll be a record of something, will there? Hopefully.
That's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
See if we can hunt down your picture.
Good, good.
Like the rest of the world, I'm having to take up the challenge of working from home. It's been productive, and I've managed to make an exciting connection. We know Benjamin West painted at least one preparatory sketch for the St. George's Chapel altarpiece, and that it went to America. I've managed to locate it, and thrillingly, it seems to have much in common with Hughes. It was recently restored for the Fralin Museum in Virginia by conservator Beth Fulton.
Hi, Beth.
Hi there. How are you today?
Very well.
I've sent Beth all of the images Aviva took of Hughes' painting, and she's shown me hers. So together, I'm hoping we can spot the same artist's hand at work.
I'm now looking at the two infrareds next to each other.
Yeah.
And it's rather exciting, isn't it?
It is. They share a lot of similarities just in the way it was drawn. You can see there are sort of the sketchy lines that he makes in the figures to denote volume.
I couldn't agree with you more. And actually, it's almost as if you're looking at an old master draftsman.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we are going to prove or try and prove ours is by Benjamin West, we will have to presumably work out where it comes in relation to yours, because ours is coloured, yours isn't.
Yeah.
There are compositional elements that seem to be slightly closer to the Detroit picture, the organisation of figures, the way the table is laid out.
Absolutely.
It would almost seem, therefore, that if ours is to be right, and it isn't someone just faking it, then ours is closer to being the sketch for the Detroit picture.
I would say so. I think in terms of a timeline, the Fralin sketch would come first, as he's just putting together this composition, and then he's making those changes closer to the final version.
It feels with Beth's help, we've mapped out a plausible evolution for this composition, but something still concerns me. Fiona has found out that Hughes is supposed to be signed, and we haven't seen any evidence of a signature.
Is yours signed?
Yes, but it's not an original signature. Someone added it later.
Right. Have you any idea when that might have been?
The paint is fairly easily soluble based on the test that we did. So my guess is that it was added sometime in the last 120 years. Yeah.
So this is an area where there's a bit of dark practice going on.
Yeah, there is definitely an issue with people who might want to try to fake a West. However, I think in this case, it's just someone who's trying to make sure that people are thinking of West when they see this.
Having a fake signature on a fully attributed West is a bit of a shock, and a reminder that it takes more than an autograph to prove that a work is genuine. So having compared both works, does Beth believe Benjamin West produced Hughes' sketch?
I would have to imagine that it was someone, if not the artist himself, someone very close to the artist who maybe even worked directly with him.
Yeah, but Hugh's not going to be very pleased if we tell him it's by someone we can't name who knew the artist very well and was very familiar with the artist's techniques. But
right. Without primary documentation, I just can't guarantee to say that this is definitely by West, unfortunately.
while we haven't been able to travel abroad, the paint sample Aviva took from the surface of Hugh's painting happily made its way to Amsterdam, and the results are back. Have the team there been able to identify at a molecular level anything that could identify West as the painting's creator?
What we know is that West used this great variety of organic materials, really exotic, daring colours, you could say, including things, it was said, like ground mummy, that would produce a sort of rich, morbid brown.
What, literally ground mummy?
Apparently so. Now, we haven't found any of that in the picture, but exciting news from Klaas Jan from the Rijksmuseum Laboratory in Amsterdam. What Jan has discovered is a chemical called euxanthone, which would almost certainly indicate the use of Indian yellow. Indian yellow that is created from the dried urine of cows that have been fed on mango leaves.
And, oh my goodness, and what, fed on mango leaves to make it extra yellow?
Well, presumably a sort of super yellow or something.
Yuck. Right, OK.
But this is where it gets interesting, because in the late 18th century and around that period, a lot of artists claimed to use Indian yellow, but the reality was it was just sort of too expensive. These exotic ingredients were beyond them.
So if you were going to use Indian yellow, which we know is in Hugh's picture, you'd have to be a successful artist just to have the money to buy it. A successful artist like Benjamin West, for example.
Exactly. So the paints, the cost of the paints, narrowed down the range of possibilities as to the artist.
So Benjamin West and his exotic papers, who knew? Back to the Christie's stencil on the back of Hugh's picture. It's proved for us that Hugh's sketch was sold at auction in 1885 as a Benjamin West. We suspect the buyer was art dealer Martin Kolnaghi. As Kolnaghi is one of the oldest art dealerships in Britain, I'm hoping its archives will reveal more. So I've come to the rather magnificent place they're held, Wadsden Manor in Buckinghamshire. Hugh has clearly already settled in.
Nice to you.
Hello, Fiona. How are you?
I'm good. Look at this.
Do you like it?
What a place.
It's just home. It's just home.
You wish. Come on. Should we go inside?
I'm hoping historian Jeremy Howard can confirm Martin Kolnaghi was the 1885 buyer and tell us where the painting went next.
Hi there.
Hello. Welcome to Wadsden.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're researching Hugh's picture, which you bought on eBay, and we've managed to establish that there is a Christie's stock number on the back, which suggests that it was obviously sold through Christie's to an M. Cole. That's all we can see, and I'm assuming that's Martin Kolnaghi, and I'm wondering if you can shed any light on that.
Well, it could be Martin Kolnaghi, but the thing is he didn't work for the family firm for very long. He was actually a very good art dealer, was regarded as having one of the best eyes in the business.
Oh,
so,
all right.
Things are looking up. Yes.
We have in the archive a miniature of Martin Kolnaghi, the man who bought your picture at one stage, which was done in 1908, the year of his death.
Thank you. He looks a very distinguished man, doesn't he? With a good eye. Painting.
Absolutely.
The first gallery he bought was in the Haymarket.
Hang on. Haymarket?
Yes. There's a Haymarket stamp on the back of the painting, isn't there?
Exactly, because on the back of Hugh's picture is a stamp that says Modern and Ancient Pictures, Haymarket.
Oh, well, that's really interesting, because he would have been in the Haymarket in the mid-1880s.
Any records of
sales.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's possible to check that because unfortunately he died in 1908. He had no children to carry on the business. And as far as I know, the business records were actually destroyed in 1940, which is when his widow died.
Destroyed it? Again? I know, just like John Nash's archive as well. What is it with these people? I have to say, I thought that coming to meet you, Jeremy, would get us over the line with the archive, but there's literally nothing.
So I think we're going to be able to help you further, unfortunately.
Once again, we're thwarted by a destroyed archive, and our provenance trail is cut short. Thanks to the Christie stencil and the Haymarket label on the back of Hughes' pictures, we know for sure that it was sold in 1885 as being The Last Supper by Benjamin West, no question. But then whiz forward to the 1960s, when we know it came into the possession of the people who then sold it to Hugh. We've got a gap between 1885 and the 1960s, about 70 years. So have we done enough? Well, we do know there was a Benjamin West Last Supper, it's missing, and it's almost exactly the same dimensions as Hughes. Is that enough? I hope so. It's time to wrap up our investigation.
Rupert has completed the restoration work, and we're all meeting back at the gallery.
Hello.
Hi, Hugh.
Hi.
Hi, Hugh. Could I introduce Rupert?
Hello, Rupert. How are
Nice
you?
to meet you.
Looking forward to seeing this. Oh.
What
It's
do you
almost
think?
a different painting, isn't it?
Rupert has dramatically rectified over 200 years' worth of damage and mistreatment.
There's more of a light and dark quality to the thing now, isn't there? It's fantastic, isn't it?
The colours are strong, and they were all there. They just couldn't see them.
By taking off the dirt, by putting back those crucial losses, that atmosphere that was hinted at in the church, I think you've got back. It's got depth, more mysticism about it.
I love this light here on the back of Judas. I think that's really beautiful. Couldn't see that before.
It's a lovely thing to work on, actually. Very satisfying.
It's not exactly like the finished painting, you know, it's the first draft.
I think it's good it's not exactly the same as the other. It makes it much more likely to be before rather than after.
There's one remaining puzzle. When this painting was sold at Christie's in 1885, it was listed as signed and dated. Has Rupert uncovered anything to solve that?
Did you find a signature or a ghost of a signature?
Well, I think possibly yes. If you look bottom, slightly left of the centre, below the cloth on the tablecloth, what looked to me like a date, and then in front of that, the remnants of 4 letters. What do you think, Philip?
Do you mind if I have a look? I mean, there is absolutely no doubt about it. There is something there.
I have to say, if you hadn't pointed this out, I would never have known this was there. I just think this is just marks.
Yes, but they're different marks. It's not in the same pigments as the drawing lines. So if it's not a signature, I don't know what it is.
But I mean, the exciting thing is, even if we can't entirely read it, we know that the lost picture that we hope this to be was once signed.
Lying a complete West signature over the fragmentary remaining signature, I think it's a good fit.
Fiona, did you find out anything about the painting after Carnegie bought it?
Gave it a good shot, but I can't quite prove it, I'm afraid.
dear.
So after Carnegie, no, we hit a bit of a dead end there, so the provenance is still elusive, I'm sorry.
I don't think we should be too glum. An unfurling provenance that has every single name, that is unbroken, it's quite rare. I mean, we've got a lot. I mean, you've done very well there.
It's just not as tightly nailed down as I would like it. Right. And I know you're thrilled with this squiggle, but it is still just a squiggle.
It's called a signature. It's called a signature.
It's judgment time. Martin Postle from the Paul Mellon Centre for Studies in British Art has been consulting with Columbia University's Professor Alan Staley, author of the Benjamin West Catalogue Raisonné. These are the people the art world trusts to authenticate a Benjamin West. They will be the ones to decide, is this a Benjamin West? And have we found the missing sketch?
to say, throughout the whole process of researching this picture, I've kept on, as it were, getting what feels like messages of Benjamin West's presence in the way that he uses his colours, in the lines that run throughout the composition. But as much as I rate this, unfortunately, the decision is not mine. And the people who the art world will listen to on this will not necessarily share my view.
Martin, very good to see you. I know you and Professor Staley have been considering Hugh's sketch.
Yeah.
This is torture.
Put him out of his misery. You're feeling pretty tense, aren't you?
suffering.
What conclusion have you come to?
Well, this is a really interesting picture. West's a really linear painter. So even when he's using paint, he's thinking about compositional lines. And here you can see, especially in this foreground, in the figure of Judas and the figures at the right, there's little kind of compositional lines that run right the way through it. It's absolutely feels like a Benjamin West in every aspect.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really fantastic.
It is. So I think you can relax on that score.
Yeah.
We've conferred about it, and we're both in agreement that this is absolutely right. Bang on, yeah. I think, having looked at the evidence, the provenance, you know, there are not many gaps, and that's important. And I think this is the picture that was sold by West's sons in 1829, so after his death. But you know, it was actually belonged to the family. I think that's important. So I also wonder whether it's the picture that West showed at the Royal Academy in 1804.
Oh, right.
It's had an interesting life.
Yeah.
It's had a varied career.
It's got
shall we
rich
say.
history, hasn't it?
It's had a rich history.
Well, it just shows also all those dark nights scrolling through eBay, and look.
Well, find a painting, when nobody was interested in it, and nobody bid against me. And for you to do all the work and find out that it actually is original, it's very fulfilling.
Just remind us, what did you buy it for on eBay?
£50.
Oh, Hugh, that breaks my heart.
So what do we think now, Philip?
He is one of the founding fathers of American painting, as well as history painter to the king. So I think you could probably add 3 zeros to your £50. I think it's a £50,000 work of art.
That's good. Good news.
Okay, go and buy some more. And I think it's a very handsome object in its own right. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
well
you.
Well done.
And I know this picture has been cleaned, but now we know so much of the backstory and we've had it all confirmed. This little picture really seems to glow.
It does, and Hugh is certainly glowing after all that. I can't help feeling sorry for the people who sold it to him for £50, but, you know, that's the way it goes. And Hugh, in amongst looking after his sheep and cows, is still trawling through the internet for pictures. So who knows? We might see him back here one day.
If you think you have an undiscovered masterpiece or other precious object, contact us at bbc.co.uk/fakeorfortune.